How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Construction Entrepreneur Podcast. We smashed it out. We're almost over 20 episodes now. We've really got some traction going, and it's been really good sort of just deep diving on each topic. And today's topic is all about business partnerships and going into business with people, because somewhere along the line, you're going to end up doing business with someone somewhere in some shape or form. You know, it doesn't matter where you are now. You might just be purely that the company is all yours. The ownership is 100% yours. But depending on the growth and the stage you get to, you're either going to get a strategic partner come on board, or you're going to dilute some of your shares for your senior management team because you're going to keep them involved, which then in essence, they are partners of the business, although it might only be a small part of the business. Or you might be at an early stage of transitioning into a newer business or a newer outfit and actually having partnerships from the off. So at some stage, it's likely going to come up that you're going to be doing some form of a partnership with someone. And people are business. You know, business is all about people. Put the right people in the right positions, and that's the key. It's fucking the right people, not the wrong people. The right people that bring a tremendous amount of value and expertise to the party of making a business work is a massive, massive strength. And look, I've got things wrong. In the past, I've done the wrong partnership deals. I've done the right partnership deals as well. So I've got a real good mix and level-headed on what works and what doesn't. And you know, for me, it all starts with the deal being right from the off. Because if you get everything out on the table first and you agree the right terms, you agree the right deal from the very beginning, and you think about things 5 or 6 steps ahead of, you know, not just looking at where the business is now, but where it's going to be and the potential of it. If you get the right deal right from the start, which we'll go through today in this episode, it just makes life so much easier versus, you know, just doing things on a fag packet and doing things maybe by just a handshake or maybe on assumptions and just getting things wrong. It just leads to a nightmare, because I've done things in the past. One particular deal I did was I provided all the energy and the expertise and the capital at the beginning to get the business started. But then as the business grew, it wasn't my role, my responsibility to keep running and doing the day-to-day of the business. And the partnership we did was a 50-50 split. Now, the problem was, at the beginning, that was great for the other party. But then as the business was growing and there was more day-to-day stuff to be done, and it was all reliant on the other party, they started then getting resentful of the ownership and the split, and because they were just in it all the time. So you've got to think about, just not from the off, long-term what's going to work. But then equally, I've done partnerships that's been fantastic, where there's been all equal shares. It's been the correct deal for what each person has been doing. It's all been done in writing. You know, everything's structured and organised in the right way, based on financials, based on numbers, not emotions, actual numbers, and a strategic plan of a business. And everyone knows what they're doing and what their job is in that business. The partnerships blossomed and flew, and we grew the company to a really decent stage. So partnerships, if you don't get them right, you are guaranteed to have a fucking nightmare on your hands. You are guaranteed to hit a lot of problems. Going into business with someone or maybe multiple people is more involved than a marriage. You know, they're going to know everything about you as a person. They're going to see all your weaknesses, all your exposures, you know, and because when things are good, it's good, it's easy. You know, it's easy for people to win and look like the hero when business is flying, when sales are coming in, money's being made, cash flow is really good, staff are working well, the business is great. But it's when a crisis happens, it's when a COVID happens, it's when a client doesn't pay you, it's when someone does something or doesn't manage a situation particularly well, and you've got to have awkward conversations at an even higher level because they're actually a partner, not just a staff member you can kick in the bollocks and maybe even fire. It's a long-term massive commitment. So you've really got to understand the person and the people that you're going into business with and know the whole crack, you know, so you're all on an even keel. Now, if you don't get it right, it's an absolute nightmare. But if you get it right, you partner with the right people, it's the right deal, it's the right structure, then fuck me, your business can transform overnight, literally, because you've got the right key people in the right place. And big companies do this all over the world, you know. It's one thing to have a small mindset of going, it's me, and a small company, but it's actually a different hat to wear as a CEO, as an owner, as a boss, you know, whatever label you want to put on it, of going strategically, who are the right people to bring in maybe as the right partnerships that's going to actually allow the business to grow to a much bigger place that's, one, easier to run, 2, more profitable, and 3, has got commercial value to actually exit and sell one day potentially, and actually do the full cycle of a business journey. So there's a lot to it. So what I've done here is listed out all the key things that I think you should do correctly and do it right. Because I think if you're going to form a partnership, you should know that person for at least a year minimum. And the reason being is you do not want to just jump into business with someone that you don't know. You have to know that person on some level. You need to know what they're like, because the curse of an entrepreneur is everything looks shiny and looks like an opportunity. And sometimes you can meet people and you might put them on a pedestal. You might think they're better than you or cleverer than you. But as you get to know them, you might realise otherwise and go, actually, no, this is actually the real crack and this is actually the real situation. You can get swept along sometimes as an entrepreneur mind of jumping into things too quickly. I've certainly done this in the past myself. So I really think it's really sound, solid advice to know that person for at least a year. And because, like I said earlier, you want to know what that person is like when they're winning. What's their character like? Does the ego drive them when they're winning, and do they become a bit of a knob? And equally, when things are going wrong or a situation's happened when there's a stress crisis, there's a lot of pressure on that person, how do they deal with it? What's their response? What's their management style? And and you can see all this on a personal level. If you know someone on a personal level that they react violently or aggressively, or they can't handle the pressure in situations in just day-to-day life, such as being with their kids, or something's happened with a friend, or they've crashed their car, how do those people react? And this is what you want to pay really clear, concise attention to, going, right, who is this person really at the core? Like, how do they actually operate? How do they conduct themselves? And who are they? Because anyone can say what they are and what they can do and how they operate, but watching is more valuable than listening. And you want to go into any business transaction like that with your ears, not your eyes, it's your ears, and listening and actually watching and just seeing how people actually react to what comes up in life. So you get a really good balanced view of that person, going, do you know what? When that went wrong, that person handled that amazingly. Kept his cool, kept composed, took care of business, did what was needed to be done, did the shift, didn't moan, didn't complain, didn't justify, just fucking got on with it. That's the business partner or a partnership you want to go with. Whereas if you flip that and something went wrong, that person flipped out, was uncontrollable, was irrational, didn't think things through, flipped off at staff members, flipped off at his wife maybe, really handled it badly, went to drink, went to drugs, went to, being a moaner, being lazy, not answering the phone. That's not the person you want a partnership with. And these are just the little basic things of just going, right, forget about the business for 1 second for any partnership. Because like I said at the beginning, business is about the people. So you've got to understand the right people with the right attitudes and the right habits and the right character traits first. That's the most important thing, because you can't train that, you can't change that. And money, when you start making money, makes that person be more of that. So if they're a dick with nothing, or they're a dick in basic low-level tasks, they're going to be a huge cock when you start making a lot of money. And they're going to be a huge cock when things go wrong as well, and you actually it's time to roll up your sleeves and get to work and change stuff. So you've got to know them for at least a year minimum. That's a golden rule of mine. You really want to know that character. And then the next one is, you really want to understand what value they're actually bringing to the table. You do not go into partnerships just because you like someone. You do not go into partnerships just because it's a gut feel. You've got to understand what actual value does that person bring to the value, because I see a lot of people going into partnerships and they're two of the same people. You're the same people, and you become a partnership just because you're friends, but you don't provide anything different. You've both got the same skill sets and you both bring the same thing to the table, and then you're just splitting a business. Maybe it's 50-50 deal for no reason, because there's no splitting value brought to the table. And when I talk about value, I don't think people fully understand. Value means basically skill sets and the character, because we're all different. We've all got different unique stuff to bring to the table. Some people are naturally very good at influence, sales, relationships, customer orientated. Some people are naturally good at just the nitty gritty, the detail, the getting things done and ticking things off a list. Everyone's got their place and everyone's got a massive value to bring. And then there's other people that are very good at strategic, they're very good at marketing, they're very good at bringing people together, they're very good at setting a plan and actually having a bit of a vision for the business and actually providing that different form of value. And that's what you want. You want partners that bring something new and different to the table. It's pointless giving up equity in a business or splitting up a partnership, and so there's different cuts of the pie and shareholdings for 2 or 3 people that are all the same. You've all got the same abilities, you've all got the same skill sets, you've got the same strengths, because then you've all got weaknesses. Everyone's strengths, there's a weaknesses somewhere, that you really want partners that plug your weaknesses, plug your blind spots, because normally someone who's very good at the sales side of things isn't so good at the execution and the delivery side of things. They're very good at opening the doors and getting the work in, but they're not so great at actually the delivery. So you really want, in that instance, you want someone who's amazing at delivery and they want to do the delivery. That's the key part. They want to do that as well, because it's no good forcing a partnership and go, well, I do this bit, so you do this bit, but they're not naturally gifted at that and they don't want to do that. So that right partnership has got to be, I'm excellent at this, I know that, that's my strength, that's my character. Your partner knows that as well. And you go, collectively, we are fucking strong. So the value, the add is fucking massive because we all bring something different to the table. And then it's about the shareholdings. Yeah, if you're going into business with someone, doesn't actually mean that you should naturally just do 50-50. It might be that someone comes in and for what they're doing within the business, their shareholding might only be 20%, 30%, 40%. Yours could be 60%, 30%. You know, it's different. It doesn't have to just because you're going into a partnership with someone, that it's 50-50. Because equally, it's based on the value, it's based on what that person's bringing, and it's based on how that business is going to operate for the longer term. Not just setting it up, but the longer term in 5 years, in 10 years. And you've got to look way further ahead than what you are just today when you're going into a partnership. You've got to be understanding, right, I'm going to be in a relationship with this person for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on what the goal of the business is and what structure you want the business to be. So you've got to think that, you've got to think really long term. And then next, you've got to have a business plan. You've got to have the open conversation around what's the actual plan? What is this partnership? Because most people, they start a partnership, especially if it's a new business, it's fresh from the scratch. They set up a company, set up the shareholdings, and then they just roll with the shit and see what happens. And it's just a backwards way of doing things. You know, business is a very unforgiving world if you fuck it up. The risk-reward ratio. There is great rewards if you get it right, but there's massive risks if you fuck it up. And just stepping back for 5 minutes, this is something I've certainly learned. Not jumping into things straight away, actually just stepping back and going, right, what's the plan? What is the actual plan in terms of the financials? Where do we want the revenue of this business to be? What gross margins do we want this business to operate at? What expenses are we likely to experience along the way of growing? What net profits do we want to anticipate? And this needs to be done on actual figures and real numbers, not fag packets, 100 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand. It needs to be on actual figures of what things are actually going to cost and actual figures of what you're actually going to be experiencing in terms of revenue and what you can actually sell and actually physically do, and what that actually boils down to in a sense of how many customers do you need to pick up a week, how many relationships you need to build, and down to the nitty gritty, and actually having a real solid financial plan and then targets that link with that financial plan of the actuals of making that happen. This is what you have to do for a business plan. You don't need to do a fucking long drawn out 38-page document on why you're the best market leader, why you're going to offer something different to the market. A business plan comes down to the fucking numbers, what financial targets you want to hit and how you're going to deliver them. If you can answer those 2 things and go, right, we want to be here in terms of finances, we want to be a £2 million business, we want to be a £5 million business, a £10 million business. This is the gross profit, this is the expenses, this is the net profit, this is what we're going to be looking at. To get there, we need to sell X of these, Y of them, and whatever of these per month, per week, per quarter, whatever way you're looking at it. That's a business plan. That's all a business plan needs to be, and that you do not need to overcomplicate it, but you need to get that bit fucking right. If that bit is wrong, you're fucked from the off. So you have to have the proper solid financials and targets plan before you even start about just going out there and actually just rolling with it and fucking around. You need to have a solid plan, and that doesn't take long when you know what you're doing. Then it's actually the business model. What work are you going after? to make that happen? What clientele? Where are those clientele? How are you going to get those clientele? Which then leads into more of a marketing and a sales process and system that you have to build out to actually make that all happen. Because anyone can look at finances and go, oh, it looks great on a bit of paper. Looks fantastic. We're going to be doing £2 million in 3 years' time. Wow, that's great. But where's the substance to that? Where's the clients coming from? How are you going to get there? What's going to be the cost of acquiring those customers? This is all the stuff you need to have drawn out first, because then doing this process, you're going to realize where you're strong and where you're weak. Because if you're both very good at maybe the operational side and you haven't got anyone coming to the table in the business of actually growing the relationships and actually the marketing and getting people in the door, then the partnership's fucked from the off, because no one's driven on that sense. So this is where it all just comes together of having that right plan. Then, once you've got to that stage and you've actually agreed, right, that's the plan, we're happy with this. And this is very on topic because I've actually just agreed a deal with a couple of guys going into business and investing in that business. And I'm actually doing this process right now. So it's very fresh on my mind. And once you've got that point, once you've gone, right, okay, that's the business plan, that's where we want the business to be, and this is how we're going to do it. Once you've all agreed at that stage, and you've all shook hands, if you like, you're doing it, the next stage has to be what is called a heads of terms agreement. Now, this bit is not a long-winded, legal, boring, arduous task. A heads of terms is a basic written document just explaining all of what I've just gone through. And it just gets everything clear on paper, and it just makes it nice and easy to understand for everyone. And you write it like an 8-year-old. You don't write it in long legal words that no one understands. You don't even get solicitors involved at this stage, because you have to agree it between your partner or someone you're doing business with, or a deal you're going to do, whether, like I say, whether it's actually staff becoming a shareholder of the business because it's part of the longer term strategy. You have to have a heads of terms that everyone agrees to, and it's all made crystal clear. Now, heads of terms, very simply, there's a few key things you need to have on there. Number one is the business overview, and just basically writing in a paragraph, this is the overview of the business. This is what it does. This is the services it provides. This is the customers that we're going after, and this is what we're going to do. If you can't write that in a small paragraph and you can't explain that in simple words, then you don't understand the business yourself. If it takes you 6 hours to explain your business and you can't write it down in clear, simple, few sentences, you don't understand the fucking business yourself. So you have to just do that as step one. Next, then you have to write down in writing the shareholding, like the percentage, who's having what share of the business, so it's nice and clear and written down. Then you want the roles and responsibilities of each partner. And this may sound weird because people go into business and go, well, I'm the business owner, I'll do what the fuck I want. It's not the attitude. When you own a business and you're working a business, or you're a partner in a business, you have a responsibility to that business to perform. And this is massively overlooked. You go into business for freedom. We all do. That's the main reason we do it. We do it for the financial gain and the freedom that it can provide later on. But whilst you own a business, and until you've got staff that are below you and you've got management teams in place, you've got responsibilities. But you still do anyway. Even when you've got a full management team, you have still got a role and a responsibility to play in that business. And it needs to be clear on that, because entrepreneurs typically are the worst managers of themselves. They're very good at pointing out where other people are weak. And I'm certainly like this myself as well. I'm very good at pointing out what other people need to do and that. But sometimes you need to actually hold yourself responsible and remind yourself of your role in the business. And this is just another lesson that I've learned along the way. So you've got to have that written down in the heads of terms, right? Each partner's role is this. So whether they are going to be more of the sales partner, more of the business development partner, maybe one person's going to be more of the operations partner, maybe one person's going to be more HR partner. It just depends on the size of the business. You need to have a role, and then the responsibilities of that and where the buck stops. So for me, for example, the business that I've now agreed to deal in, I'm going to be the commercial director, if you like, the commercial partner of that business, doing all of the strategy, the vision, the plan of the business, all of the finances and the whole structure of the company. And really the buck stops with me on all the financial decisions, all of the business decisions. And that's just clearly listed out within that document, so it's nice and clear. And then the other partners within that business, they've got the same for their roles. The buck stops with them for delivery on site and all these other little bits. And you've got to have that really just detailed out. Doesn't need to be a lot. It could be 3, 4, 5 key roles and responsibilities for each person. But it's nice and clear because everyone's got their area to work in. And this is, again, another thing with partnerships. You have to be going into partnership with people that you let them do what their roles and responsibilities are. You do not micromanage and have influence in them. Yes, you work collectively as a team, as a business collective, as owners. You have to work together and chew the fat and discuss situations, but you have to let people stick to their strengths and make those decisions right for the greater good of the business and the plan that we've already spoken about. And you can only do that when you've got a plan, because then it always comes back to that and those financial targets of going, well, this is the plan, these are the targets. Does this decision over here get us faster to those targets, or does it take us longer? Or does this decision over here on the other side of the business get us there faster, or does it take longer? Or is it an investment that overall is going to pay off in the long term to get us to the fucking result and the business that we want set out in the financials and the business plan that you start? And obviously, the business plan does change over time. As you get into it, things change, things move, opportunities arise. It's a constant evolving, moving thing, but you've always got to come back to that basis of why you started the business, why you started the partnership, so everyone's on a nice, even keel. Then the next thing you have to discuss is the remuneration, getting paid. How does that work? How does that look like? You've got to have that agreed on paper as well. We're going, okay, well, for stage one of the business, as we grow it, and this is something we're doing, is going, well, stage one, we want to get to this level. And the remuneration is going to be fairly low in that point, because you want to keep the money in the business and we want to grow and evolve the business. And that's a smart way of doing it. But you need to have those conversations, because if you don't, some people start seeing money going into a bank account and they go, well, I want that. But obviously, if you're drawing dividends, you've got to take equal shares. You've all got to be on the same page of not just starting the business and then people want to bleed that business dry because they're getting a bit cash hungry and it's not the right thing for the business. So you have to have that discussion as well. We're going, okay, well, once we get to this point, we're going to be just taking this much from the business, because there's no point just stripping the business out of cash. Then when we get to that point, maybe it's year 1, year 2, year 3, we will then review that and actually change what we're going to take from the business as a base payment, if you like. You've got to have that all mapped out. So you go, right, that person is going to be taking that much from the business. This person's going to be taking this much from the business, because it's all in line with that financial plan again. And then it's the next key thing is the dividends factor of, once there is a net profit available at the end of the year or each financial year in the business, you need to have that agreement ahead before it comes to a point where you've made decent money. You need to have that agreement and a structure in place of going, right, well, when we are making money, this is how we're going to treat dividends. This is how we're going to draw it, so that you're on the same page from the off. Because it would just turn into arguments. Trust me, the biggest arguments you'll have will come around money and financials more when you're actually making the money itself, and you can't be pulled in different directions, because it's going to put the brakes on the business. It's no good having a business that's made a few £100,000 net profit, proper net at the very bottom, and one partner wants to take all of that out and the other one wants to reinvest it and keep it back in to keep growing the business. So again, it's just all linked, and it sounds simple when you talk through this stuff, but people don't do this. People do not do this. And it just makes life so much easier. So you've got to have that agreement on dividends as well, how you draw financials out. Then lastly, the next thing actually is the investment. So what money do you need to put into the new business bank account or the current bank account, if it's a merger or it's a later on deal? What's the investment? What's the fee of the shareholdings? Because again, that's going to be linked heavily to the financial plan. What money do you actually need up front to get the business rolling? What do you actually need to spend money on? And I'm a big fan of keeping the business very lean at the beginning. You do not need to piss money away. You can start businesses for very low sums of money, doing it in the right way. You do not need to just waste money on stuff. Again, it all comes back to a financial fucking plan and really know what you're doing. But you need to be very clear on that investment and when that investment's going to be paid back as well, and just how that's all going to work from each partner. Because equally, if the shareholdings are not equal, let's say one person's got 80%, the other person's got 20% because they're only doing a small part, the investment's going to differ between those two people. But equally, you can restructure the deals as well, where the remuneration might be different between partners because one person's putting more money in, the other person might be putting more sweat equity in. Doesn't have to always be financial. It could be they're putting more time in, or they're actually bringing work to the table, or they're bringing opportunity to the table, and that is their equity in. So the investment might be different. That's all got to be just ironed out in that document. And then lastly, you've got to have any conditions, any specific conditions that you think may arise, that may be a problem such as if you start a business and after 2 years, one person wants to leave, how does that work? How do you dilute the shares? How do you exit that person out of the business? If someone gets critically ill, how do you deal with that? And all these just little bits and conflicts of interest maybe. You don't want to be partnering with someone who's then potentially going to derail your business or, the workload and take you somewhere else. You've got to just cover off some basic stuff of conditions that just protect people. And you're only going to know that when you know exactly what business it is and the potential risks and threats to that business. And I think that this is where it all comes down to, you guys, is that when people look at partnerships and business opportunities and transactions, it's very easy just to get sucked in and be so positive about the potential of it and actually looking at, right, but we're going to make fucking loads of money. Great, let's go, I'm in. Whereas actually you need to look at all the worst cases and go, what's the potential threats here? What's the biggest risks and how do we minimize those risks? And actually, as I've got older and learned more, a lot of the smartest people you know and the most successful people you know, even in terms of investments as well, is that they've actually just minimized the risks as much as possible at every step. It's not actually about the big wins, the big, massive lottery ticket mindset of something huge is going to happen. It's actually about minimizing risk on every level that you can. And this is what a heads of terms does, and what a real decent business plan does, is you're just minimizing all the risks of what could go wrong and what do we do if that does go wrong, and how do we stop that if that thing starts to happen. That's what a really smart business person does. And that's what these conditions cover off, and that's what a really good heads of terms does. But that is it. And you guys might come back to this in the future, this episode of when a partnership opportunity arises, that you just listen back to this and go, do you know what, that's got some really good valuable information in there for actually setting up a business deal and a transaction. But on the whole, I believe partnerships are a fantastic thing if, like I said at the beginning, it's the right partnerships with the right people, for people that bring value, and it's in line with where the business wants to go, where you want the business to go, what ultimately you want from that business as well. So you've just got to consider all of that and just step back. And that would be my final bit of advice on this podcast. If you are considering any form of partnership, going into something with someone else or bringing someone new into a current business you've got, just step back and breathe and think about it, and just go for a coffee on your own for an hour and just think about every possible thing that could go wrong, as well as what could go right. I'm not saying be negative whatsoever. I'm talking about just being fucking smart about things. Really mull things over and just take some notes, write things down, and just think about stuff so it's all done and cool. And I think that's a really good way of operating as a business owner and a business person. And then once you've done that, you get those heads of terms agrees and you crack on. You push on with the business and you just follow that fucking plan and you eat it. You go through it and just make it happen. So that's it for this episode, guys. If you have liked this episode, please give it a share. Drop it on your stories on Instagram and tag me in it. Take a screenshot if you're listening to the podcast on whatever you're listening it to, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Apple or Spotify. Tag me on Instagram. It's at Dean Barton Real. It'd be great to see people that are actually listening to it and sharing it, and it just gets them a bit of exposure for it. It helps me out. And that's all I ask for doing the podcast. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. Bosh.